Hey there everybody, this is Cassandra from cassandratindall.com, and today's video is all about Venus and Pluto. So the reason I wanted to bring up the topic of Venus and Pluto is that firstly this week these two planets conjoin. So this is the first of a series of 4 Venus-Pluto conjunctions in Capricorn we're going to have over the next 12 months or so. So let's cover the details. So I'm going to share my screen with you so everybody can see what's going on astrologically, and also to just sort of visualize it and get some dates for the diary. So this upcoming transit happens at 25 degrees of Capricorn. So that takes place here in Australia on the 29th. If you are in the Northern Hemisphere, that'll be the day before on the 28th. So that's the first one. So that's the opening conjunction of Venus and Capricorn for this cycle, or sorry, Venus and Pluto for this cycle. So if we just fast forward this, Venus moves quite quickly throughout 2021. And the next aspect is when she joins Pluto one more time, and this will happen on the 11th, 12th of December, again, depending on your time zone. Okay, so that is again the same degree that it's happening now in January. Okay, so then what happens just a few days after that is that Venus was going real slow now, and she's actually going to station retrograde at 26 degrees of Capricorn around the 18th and 19th of December. So she's going real slow. So she's just passed that conjunction with Pluto. And so now she's stopped, she's stationed, she's retrograde, and now she is going to come back and hit Pluto as an exact aspect one more time. And that's going to take place on Christmas Day. So a very deep, cathartic, celebratory feeling there for many of us. And then, of course, the final aspect will happen in March. So that's very early March. Pluto gathers some speed, as does Venus by then, and they will combine once again at that 27-degree mark of Capricorn. So if you've got planets or points in your birth chart around, let's say, the 24 to 28 degrees of your birth chart, the next sort of 12 and a bit months, these aspects are going to really bring up some Venus type situations in your life. So let's dig a little deeper into that and discover who Venus is. Okay, so Venus in astrology is our archetypal symbol of all that is to do with love, beauty, harmony, relationships. One of the ways I'll often describe Venus is she's our planet of when the bills are paid and the jobs are done, what do you want to do with yourself? What do you do for fun? What do you do for pleasure? And what do you do for enjoyment? Venus in your own birth chart will give you more details about how she operates. I often think about Venus too as the nursery rhyme, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And she is sparkly and she's beautiful and she twinkles there in the night sky, and she just has this attractive magnetic force, and that is Venus. She, by virtue of just the fact that, she symbolically breathes, is that she will draw people in. She's very warm, she's very affectionate, she's very charming, and everybody just sort of wants to be in her energy. So she is the concept of magnetism and attraction. She's also a planet that describes beauty and ritual. So this might be, ritual in a more religious or spiritual sense. It might be some of the family rituals that you have, or it may even be just some of, the personal rituals that just make you feel good. Okay, Venus is a planet of feeling good. And it also reminds me of what the French call the toilette, and that is the ritual of getting ready, like the shower, maybe putting on some makeup or a beautiful fragrance. And that's one of the reasons why perfume is called eau de toilette. It's like the water of ritual or something along those lines. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. And so Venus describes these things. She's the affectionate bonds we share with other people, whether those are the bonds of friendship and kinship, whether those are the bonds of a more romantic or intimate nature. She describes, her essential nature is to unify, to bind and connect. She's the compromiser and the negotiator. So I'll often use the analogy of when you're baking a cake and you've got your dry ingredients, and sometimes you need to keep the dry ingredients and the wet ingredients separate. But when you bind them, you get closer to making that beautiful cake or whatever the recipe is that you're making. So the act of combining the wet to the dry gives you this beautiful batter. Add heat to that, pop it in the oven, and it rises up and it becomes a beautiful piece of food to eat. So Venus is moderate in her own temperature. She's not too hot, she's not too cold, she's Goldilocks. She's just right. And she's also she has a moisture. She is considered a wet planet. And so the idea of heat combined with moisture are two of the qualities that are said to be life affirming. They're very spring-like. So when we've had a bit of rain and the sun comes out, the garden goes crazy. The bugs come out and all the insects, which you can hear probably in the background of the video. And the weeds come up too. And so enter Pluto. Pluto is the lord of the underworld. He's our planet where angels may fear to tread. Pluto is that cathartic, transformative, heavy. I often think of a Pluto transit in the terms of Winston Churchill, who one of his quotes was, "The only way out is the way through." So over the next 12 to 14 months, Venus has got a long road ahead of her. She's going to be continually meeting up with Pluto within a range of just 2 degrees. So when Venus and Pluto come together, we are taking perhaps a deeper, dark look at relationships. When I say dark, it doesn't have to always mean, because it certainly can, but it doesn't always have to mean that it has to be, dark in a more, less appropriate kind of dark. It often can mean the parts of ourselves or the parts of our relationship that we often ignore, whether that's because of a fear of vulnerability, whether that's because just the day-to-day runnings of life and you don't get to have that true, deep, intimate conversation or connection with a loved one. And so Pluto is the planet that symbolizes the transformation that is possible when you pull apart a structure, when you pull apart another symbol and really examine it for the pieces that it is, or the pieces of it. And then from there, you can rebuild it and renew it. It's almost like sometimes I will think about Pluto as a bit of a pimple, in the sense that when it's conjoined to another planet, you'll feel it. Like, maybe it's a Venus, got a pimple on your face, right? And you feel it coming up, it's getting a little bit sore, you realize it's there. And then of course it ripens enough. And then you can basically sort of expel or extract the more toxic components of that, little infection in the hair follicle. So, we can have it on the skin. And then of course, once it is extracted, then you can apply that any topical creams or ointments to help heal it and renew. And we will also have these type of symbols in our life as well. It doesn't have to just be about our skin or our physical appearance. It'll often show up in relationships. So this often reminds me of a phrase that my grandmother used to say, that relationships take truth, trust, and tolerance. And so when Venus and Pluto connect, we are faced with the truth. We are faced with the truth of the connection that you share with the particular person, whether it's honest and whether you can trust it. And then, of course, once you've got to that part, it's what am I prepared to tolerate? Because sometimes Pluto will also show up as the need to separate or sever or cut off things that are toxic, dead, decaying, or dying. And relationships do go through their own processes of birth, death, renewal. And that doesn't necessarily mean with the same person. Sometimes, as a part of our own personal journeys, we need to end something so we can therefore go on and heal and grow. So Pluto transits tend to bring to the surface things that are otherwise hidden, dark, the things that we can maybe sort of subliminally feel but can't quite put our finger on. It can feel like an undercurrent or an undertow in things. It can show up as a power play, manipulation, subtle or obvious control. This could be in a workplace situation or with a romantic partner too. So when Pluto and Venus meet, we're kind of collectively invited to explore the willingness that you as an individual and a partner in business or in life have to look at each other as individuals and as a unit. So I think relationships are three components. There's the two individuals in it, and then the entity that they form as a relationship. And so it's whether you can go through this road of vulnerability, of exposure, of truth and trust, and eventually, maybe, tolerance and acceptance with this person. And whether you can actually heal those parts of yourself as opposed to projecting it outwards. I don't know where I heard this from, but I've used the line a lot. And sometimes we can attract in relationships people who bleed all over us, but we were not the person that cut them. And so that means that they're reflecting wounds within us that we have yet to heal, the vulnerability or the intimacy we're yet to find within ourselves. One important thing to remember with Venus is that she is the symbol of the Aphrodite, the lady riding in on the clamshell and, holding up the mirror to herself. And relationships really do hold up that mirror. What part, especially if you're in a cyclic situation, either with one person or with several, over the course of time. And so, the idea of bleeding over other people is often done in relationships. So Pluto, particularly in Capricorn, is also, and Venus is very cautious, very strategic, very much about planning. And you may come to the realization that there is a certain end of the road. Pluto can literally signify the death of a relationship too. And some relationships are better off for dying, particularly if there is manipulation, control, abuse of power, or you're simply not growing and evolving within it. So not everybody is going to be deserving of the level of transformation that is possible. Sometimes we have to do it alone. Sometimes we have to sever the tie and then do our own healing. Because it's not always necessary to talk to the other person about your need to do that. So if the situation is abusive, for instance, you're not really going to want to deal with that. You're just going to get out of the situation and then move on. So Pluto, because it's such a planet that symbolizes power, and when we are in these difficult dynamics in a relationship, all relationships take, as I say, it takes two to tango. And sometimes the process of transformation and renewal and regeneration comes also too from the hard realization that you actually gave your power away. But from that place is where you can be reforged and renewed and, essentially healed. And so as Venus comes to meet Pluto this week, it's also going to do so under the full moon Okay, so the full moon in Leo. So again, this is full light. This is something becoming illuminated, something that was hidden or under the surface is going to be hard to ignore right now. So Venus Pluto can often show that manipulation dynamic. You know, I remember many moons ago, I was working for a friend of mine, and you know, his business really grew in allied health. It wasn't attached to astrology in any way. And his business was really just booming and needed a lot of additional support staff. And he found this wonderful bookkeeper. She was such a lovely person, and, you know, really, I guess, Capricorn in a sense. I don't know her astrology, but this is going back a really long time. And, you know, she got things done. She was so efficient. She had some bright new ideas and was really feeling like that there was momentum building. And she used to come into the clinic, you know, once, twice a week and just organize things for the owner. And then one day she didn't turn up anymore. I was like, oh, what happened to, you know, whatever her name was? I haven't seen her for a while. And turned out she was like siphoning money from the business. And so, you know, we can, you know, feel that sometimes in a situation where there's an undertone or a subliminal quality to something, but it's the things we turn a blind eye to. Oh, but she's so efficient, and these little things that we're not, that don't quite gel with us, don't feel quite right, we'll just gloss over. I'm sure we've all had situations in our life where we may have wanted one thing from a desire or a passion, that Venus, the desire to connect, where we therefore overlook or ignore or push down the more felt, subliminal, hidden parts of us. And Pluto can really also speak to that deep gut instinct too. So it may be a situation where you become aware of a dynamic that could come as a surprise, or it could be something that, oh, here it is, here's the full moon, I'm aware of it now. So you don't need to always confront the other person about these sorts of things. You know, there is some things are best left unsaid, and you can go through the path of forgiveness or wholeness from doing it solo. You know, I was in a situation, you know, many moons ago now that was abusive. And, you know, all you can do in those situations is just sever ties, move on, and go through your own process. Because when somebody is in a position that is very controlling, very abusive, whether it's physical, emotional, or both, you can't reason with a madman, as they say. So sometimes it's about doing the solo journey as well as it is with the partnership journey. And then often when you get into the next relationship, you might take another couple perhaps, and then you draw that proverbial line in the sand. And I think when Venus is touched by Pluto, she's forever changed. And you get that opportunity to draw that proverbial line in the sand and go, never again. And Pluto is very much a do or die planet in that regard too. So our dark desires or our needs or wants of whatever the consequences are, there can be a total disregard for that too. In the situation, you know, whether this woman in where I used to work needed the money, or she just wanted the power or the feeling of control. I don't know what her motivations were, but sometimes you'll experience or you know, see it in the news perhaps, where somebody just wants something from somebody and they just take it. A little bit like the myth of Persephone, where she is, you know, this Venusian child who is abducted by Hades and taken into the underworld. So unfortunately, sometimes Venus Pluto transits can literally bring up those type of things. We may see it in the news, or it's a more symbolic process where you see a situation from a place of innocence and then realize that somebody may not be all as they seem. So I could talk about Venus and Pluto aspects for such a long time, but I wanted to just touch on the deeper component to this aspect, because it's an aspect that, while it only happens once this week, it is a continuation of theme, and we'll get to revisit that back in December. So just keep in mind, if you begin a new relationship this week, or you hit troubled times within a relationship this week, that there is a chance to revisit things by year's end. And if you are on a personal journey of healing, of exploring truth, trust, and honesty within your own self, then it may be a realization that you make this month that may come to a beautiful conclusion as Venus goes through, these Pluto transits again, December, and again in March 2022. So I hope you enjoyed that, and it's given you some food for thought, how Venus moves with Pluto. These are really quite intense energies. They can bring things up from the surface, but it brings them up so they can be worked through and healed and transformed. And of course, sometimes the best way to transform something is just to cut it right out of your life. That's always an option too. So I hope this has given you some insight, and I look forward to catching you in the next video.